Hey guys, Greg Alexander. Today I want to do a video for you guys who want to get into bass fishing. You really don't even know how to even get started, which direction to go, what equipment to buy, all that type of thing. So this is a beginner's guide to bass fishing. So you've watched some shows on TV, you've been fishing a little bit, you really want to learn how to be a better bass fisherman, or even to just get started as a bass fisherman. Maybe you're still a young kid or teenager, or maybe you're an older guy and you just want to change in your life and you want to do something more fun, more exciting. So the first thing you need to go fishing is a rod, a reel, and line. That's the very first thing you have to have. That is the tool, the one tool that you cannot do without for fishing. So my suggestion to beginner bass fishermen would be to purchase a spinning reel. It has a openable bail. You hook the line with your finger and you cast it. When you buy the spinning reel, don't buy a super expensive one right off the get-go, but buy something that's, medium price, 50, 60, 70 bucks, something like that. That'll do the job for you. Then with that spinning reel, you're going to need a spinning rod. Now, you go to the store and you'll see all kinds of rods in the store. Make sure that you purchase a spinning rod and not a casting rod. And you'll know because this first eye right here is really large and sticks off of the rod. On a casting rod, that first eye is going to be about that big. You understand? About the size of your fingernail. So you want the spinning rod with the spinning reel. Make sure you size it up properly. Get yourself some 12-pound monofilament line, fill it up, and you'll have the equipment that you need to get ready. Now, if you go back and watch a couple of my videos, I've done a video on how to select a spinning reel and how to select a spinning rod, which will help you if you have further questions on that. You can go back and watch that video. So once you get that spinning rod, spinning reel, now you got to learn how to cast, right? So the only way you're going to do that is to either tie a little weight onto the end of your line and practice casting into buckets or targets or whatnot in your backyard, or into the pond if you got a pond around you somewhere close by. Practice your casting to get proficient at casting. After you become proficient with that, down the road you'll probably want to step up to add a bait casting rod and reel setup. And a bait casting reel looks something like this. You'll want one with a tensioner knob, and on this side there's a dial. That's a magnetic brake. So you can tension it for the weight. You can use the magnet, increase the magnet all the way when you first start. When you get more proficient with your thumb and your thumb gets talented at stopping the line at the right places, you can back off of that a little bit. So that's what you'll move up to. When you buy the rod for that, like I told you, it's a different type of rod. It has the first eye is a smaller eye. And you'll want probably, I'd probably want maybe a 6'6" medium heavy fast rod to go with that. That's going to be your best overall rod to go with your bait casting reel. So there are some equipment issues. So basic lures, I started, I'm gonna tell you my story at the end. I'm gonna give you my progression as a bass fisherman. I'm going to give you my progression, the steps that I went through personally to go from a bobber fisherman to a tournament fisherman to a successful tournament fisherman. I'll give you that towards the end here. But basic understanding to get started you only need to probably have about 4 or 5 different types of lures to start. Really, you could start with one. And if you only had one lure to start with, I would suggest you start with a stick worm. This is a Senko. A lot of different companies make a lot of different stick worms. Yum makes them and everybody else makes them. And they all will work. This is a color called green pumpkin. Green pumpkin, black, black and blue. If you had those 3 colors, or just green pumpkin and black and blue, that's probably all you would need. So how would you rig this? Well, some people rig them what they call wacky style. They take the hook and they put it right through the little egg sac portion of the worm, like that. And you can use a weedless hook. You can use a smaller hook to do that with. And that makes the worm kind of fall like that. And that's a good way to fish it. But probably the best overall way to fish it would be to Texas rig it. And the reason I say that is because that Texas rig will get that Senko into a lot of more sloppy pond scum, trees, bushes, lily pads and whatnot without hanging up. So you can fish it a lot more places. So in order to Texas rig, what I mean by Texas rig worm, you take like a 3/0, this is a 3/0 EWG, extra wide gap hooks, got a little bend in it here to hold the worm on. And you would thread that in about 1/4 of an inch and then come straight out the side, right? Slide that up onto the top part of the hook, spin that around, see now it's on there like that. And then you're gonna measure where the hook hits the worm, right? Where the bottom of the hook, this part hits the worm. And then you're gonna put your thumb right there so you know where it is. Go straight through the worm, see it came out the other side. And now you're gonna push up on the worm and then let the hook kind of bite back into it. That's like what we call Texposed Texas rig worm. And you can throw that with no weight. It'll sink on its own, very enticing to the fish. It'll work in, 0 to 5, 6 feet of water. Now, weightless is not going to go down between heavy pads or grass, or sometimes it'll get hung up in a bush. So you can take this same worm when you need to get it down to the bottom faster or down through some cover that it won't sink through, and you can add a bullet weight, right? Shaped like a bullet. Put it right on your line before you tie the hook on, and it'll sit right on top of the it'll get it down where it needs to get. So a hook, a Senko, a bullet weight, you can pretty much fish anything you want to fish. So the next bait that you would need for a starter bait would be like a 1/4 ounce chartreuse and white or white spinnerbait. This is a chartreuse and white spinnerbait. This one just happens to have a red blade on it, which is a little better in dirtier water situations. But a chartreuse and white spinnerbait, how do you fish that? You tie it on, you throw it out, you reel it in. You can reel it slower to keep it closer to the bottom. You can reel it faster to get it to the top. And you can give it some jerks and things like that to try to trigger some fish. Catches fish everywhere. The next lure that I would recommend that you start with would be a shallow diving square bill crankbait. Now, you only really need 2, maybe 3 colors of square bill crankbait to start with. This is probably the most popular color. This is chartreuse, black back. It dives 3 to 5 feet. Catches fish, all year, except in the middle of winter, it won't catch them. And as a beginning fisherman, I would cut that front treble hook, that's missing. I would cut that front treble hook off, leave the back 2 parts of it, but the front off. That'll save you a lot of hang-ups. Now, I have another video you can look up under Alexander Gregg called 4-wheel driving your crankbait. And that'll give you a little bit more insight on how to fish that. So the next bait that you're probably going to want to have is this warm summer day and the fish are really active, and you're going to want to, you got a low light situation, it's early in the morning, late evening, or a cloudy day, and you're going to want to have a 1/4 ounce buzz bait. Now this one has a little white worm on the back of it with some action, or you can have just a regular white skirt or black skirt or a chartreuse and white skirt, and this just spins. You reel it on top and it gurgles across the top. It'll sink if you stop it, it'll sink. So you want to reel it on top and it'll gurgle and the fish will come up and eat it. Great bait for big fish, great bait for excitement because you get to see everything that's going on. And then the last bait I would recommend to start with, now understand there are thousands of different kinds of baits, and all of them have a time and a place where you can catch fish. But these are just what I would call 5 staple baits that any starting bass fisherman should probably have. Now this bait here, this next one, is one of the most exciting baits you'll probably ever fish. Let me take it out of the package. And it's another topwater bait. This is a topwater frog. Okay, this one's white or black, probably all you need. It floats. It's weedless. The hooks are, you can see the hooks are kind of next to the body, but when a bass bites down on it, he gets a mouthful of hook. So this bait you can throw in the absolute worst conditions cover-wise. Pond scum, slop, lily pads, thick bushes, trees. It skips real well when you learn how to skip a bait. It skips real well under docks. It skips real well under overhanging trees. And that bait right there will catch you some big fish, and it really is a fun bait to fish. A lot of people get addicted to frog fishing. So they're the 5 baits that I would recommend that any beginner bass fisherman have. Now, once you have your equipment, once you have a couple baits and a little tackle package to carry them in, then what do you do next? Obviously, you're going fishing, right? But you need to practice casting. You need to watch all of my videos for sure, because you're going to learn a lot if you watch my videos and other people's videos too. And there's plenty of fishing shows on TV, but not a lot of the fishing shows on TV are really instructive. They more just kind of show you that they're fishing and show you what they're catching. So my videos are going to be more instructive, like with the details and things like that. So then you're going to want to try to find a local bass club. Now, a lot of bass clubs don't advertise, here we are. So you probably need to show up, like on a Saturday morning early or a Sunday morning early at the local boat ramps and things like that, and start talking to people. Hey, are you guys in a club? Are you taking any members? Do you know a club that's taking any members? Guys that you see launching or getting back or loading back up again in the afternoon. And most of these guys will be able to point you in the right direction about getting into a bass club. And you'll learn a lot by getting in a bass club. You don't have to have, there's some bass clubs where it's boaters only, but a lot of bass clubs are boaters and guys without boats that just go along for the ride. They might help with the gas expenses and things like that, but you can get into one, and I would suggest that. Now, you should probably also subscribe to, on Facebook, there's a lot of bass fishing forums and a lot of bass fishing pages that you can join. Ask questions, people answer your questions, post your pictures, things like that. I would also probably suggest that you would subscribe to some of the more popular bass fishing magazines like Bassmaster, and FLW has a magazine, MLF, all have magazines, which if you're not a magazine type person, you can also get them on your computer, with a subscription. And follow, as many fishing websites as you can follow, but you the goal was to go fishing, not to just be entertained watching videos and things like that, which we all like those. So you're going to want to go fish as much as possible wherever you can get to. Wherever there's a public access area, if you don't have a boat, get to the public access area and fish and try this lake, this river, that pond, you know, around all the places that you can get to. So let me give you my progression as an angler, so it'll kind of help you understand what I did to get where I'm at. So my progression was simple. I started as a young guy, you know, 7, 8 years old, getting a fishing rod for Christmas with some bobbers and hooks and walking down to the local pond off of a public dock with bread balls and worms and started catching bluegill. And then I moved up to buying a couple of lures because, you know, I heard, well, lure, you can catch them on lures too. So back in my day, you know, we're talking about now like the late 60s. I bought some rooster tail spinners and some Daredevil red and white spoons. And my first bass ever came on a red and white Daredevil spoon. And I had only ever caught bluegill before, and I thought that was the biggest monster fish I'd ever caught in my life. Now, the fish was probably 13 or 14 inches long. Wasn't a giant by any stretch of imagination, but compared to a 4 to 6 inch bluegill, it was an absolute giant. And that kind of hooked me right there. So I started with a spinning rod and a spinning reel. I had a Mitchell 300, old-timey reel, but a pretty good reliable reel. It was a metal reel with all metal components, no plastic in it at all. And that reel lasted me quite a lot of years. But a Mitchell 300 with a spinning rod. I don't even remember the brand of the spinning rod. And then after several years of fishing with that, I stepped up to a bait casting rod and reel and actually saved my money, and I bought an Abu Garcia 5500. It was a bait caster reel back in the day, kind of top of the line. I mean, I think I probably paid, this was like 1973, and I think I paid almost $50 for that reel. I mean, it was a hit for me as a kid. I was a paper boy, didn't have a lot of money. But I bought that rod and I bought that reel, and that allowed me to fish some different lures, some heavier lures, some lures that needed a little bit more power and finesse in order to fish them. So in between that spinning rod and that bait casting rod, I actually bought a spin caster, which is like what they call the little closed face reel, push button reel. And I really liked that rod and reel. It was a Daiwa rod and a Daiwa reel. And I learned how to skip with that because that's like almost impossible to backlash or bird's nest as a spin caster. That's why you see so many little kids with the spin caster, because it's pretty much maintenance. It's hassle free. So I had these things, and we moved to a little pond, and I wanted to get on the pond, and we didn't have a boat. So I literally built, like Tom Sawyer, a log raft to get out onto the lake with a homemade paddle that I kind of fashioned out of a board. And I did that for a while, and it didn't last real long because it got waterlogged and it got where it just was almost unfishable. So a little bit of time goes by, and I purchased a belly boat, which is an inner tube basically that you sit in, put a pair of fins on your feet, and you could kick around. And man, I could get pretty much anywhere I wanted to in these ponds. You know, you needed to do it in summertime, obviously, because you'd freeze to death doing it any other time of year. But I did it a lot in the summertime, and I fished out of a belly boat. And then a little time later, my dad bought a 12-foot Sears aluminum V-bottom boat. No motor, no nothing. Set of oars is all it had. And we fished out of that for a little while. And so I saved my money from the paper route that I was on. And I bought an ESKA, E-S-K-A trolling motor from Sears, and a small battery charger and a 12-volt battery. And I was uptown. I mean, I'd gone from nothing to a log raft to a belly boat to a V-bottom boat with no power to now I have a trolling motor. And my buddies had John boats with trolling motors, and every once in a while we'd put both of our motors on the same boat with both of our batteries, and then we could really get down the pond when you put two trolling motors on there with two batteries. And that's what we did. So some time goes by, you know, we start a little bass club in the neighborhood and start trading lures between ourselves. And then we got smart and thought, well, we really can't afford a lot, but if we pooled our money together, then we could buy like bulk packages of these worms that we like. So that's what we did. We pooled our money together as kids and we bought bulk packages of worms. And they lasted us, you know, a long time. And, you know, as a kid anyhow, you didn't just throw the worm away when it got tore up. I mean, when our worm got tore up, then we went home with a candle and we melted the tears back together again so that we could reuse the worms. And that's how we survived, you know, back then fishing with, as a kid, with not a lot of money. So, like I said, I stepped up to a bait caster and it allowed me to fish some different lures. Later on, several years goes by, now I'm past my teens and into my 20s, and I joined a local bass club on a tip from a friend. Hey man, we got a bass club, you want to get in it? And I was like, yeah, I do. And I got in that bass club as a co-angler. I didn't have a boat, you know, I didn't have a boat. I had that little 12-foot V-bottom, but didn't have a trailer to take it anywhere or a truck to put it in even. So I got in that bass club as a co-angler, and then after fishing in that club for a while, I kind of got the idea, well, I'd like to have my own boat. So I started looking around and I bought a homemade, somebody had put together a bass boat out of something that wasn't really a bass boat, to put carpet in it, a trolling motor and all that thing, all those things. And it had a flasher graph. It had a hand-controlled trolling motor on the front, not a foot control. And it was a 35 horsepower Johnson on the back of it. And I started fishing as a boater. Then a little bit of time goes by and I started fishing the local buddy tournaments in that particular boat, and actually won a little bit of money doing it. And these guys had these skeeter boats and whatnot, and I was like, man, these guys must be like the best fishermen in the world, because look at their boats. You know, I looked at their boats, not their ability, but I looked at their boats and thought they had to be the best fishermen in the world. And it was a little bit intimidating, but I kept fishing them. And then our club joined the federation, the local federation, and we started fishing the federation state qualifying tournaments to qualify for the state team, where they actually would pick guys to go fish against other states and pay your way and all that type of stuff. And I thought, well, that sounds like something that I could do. And I qualified for the state team on my second try. And when I made the state team, I thought, man, I have arrived as a bass fisherman. And so I couldn't possibly go fish the SQT in another state with this old homemade bass boat that I had anymore. So I took the big plunge, and with my wife's approval, I bought a brand new Ranger bass boat, a Bassmaster Classic Edition 363V with a 150 Johnson on the back of it. And that thing would run like 63 miles an hour. And I thought, man, I've truly have arrived now, because now I've not only have I made the state team, but now I have one of these boats that the real fishermen have. And the whole time here now, other than some time when I took off in college and high school, I was acquiring more and more tackle few more rods, a few more reels, finding out which rods I liked, which rods I didn't like, which reels I liked, which reels I didn't like. And I'm also acquiring a lot of info, seeing what other people were doing, and a lot of experience by actually being out on the water myself. I've gone on to be, relatively successful bass fisherman because of one reason. I have kept at it, worked at it, invested my time, invested my money, invested my intellectual curiosity into bass fishing. Now, you may be watching this now and you have no desire to be a tournament fisherman. You just want to know how to go bass fishing. You can take my progression here and you can stop anywhere along that line, or you can go past where I've gone as a fisherman. It's up to you what you're going to do with it. But all I can do here today is point you in the right direction, give you some tools to work with, to get you started and get you on the right path. Now, one piece of advice I would give you, is don't overinvest. Don't say I'm going to be a bass fisherman and you've never even owned a John boat and you say you're going to go out and buy a brand new bass boat. I'm going to go and buy $1,500 worth of rods and reels and $10,000 worth of tackle. I've seen people do that over the years, and sometimes what you think you want is not really what you want. So I would suggest, and some of these people, their boats parked in the garage for the last 10 years, their rod and reels are covered with dust, and they don't fish, ever. But they invested all this money into it thinking that they wanted to do it. So my advice to you would be, step in slowly. As you realize you want more, get a little bit more. And as you realize you want a little bit more, get a little bit more. Educate yourself along the way, and you can reach whatever point you want to reach in bass fishing. But start slow and be consistent. And don't do anything you don't want to do. Do it if you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it because somebody else wants you to. Do what you love, and you'll always love what you do. So again, if you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel. It will help me. It'll help you. And have a blessed day. Thank you.